Account-based marketing is one of those tactics and one of those playbooks that a lot of people are running and a lot of people are spending a ton of money and effort to do without necessarily seeing the results that maybe make it worth that investment. So I was really excited to talk to Mason Cosby, who runs Scrappy ABM, about ways you can get started with account-based marketing without spending thousands and thousands of dollars on your tech stack and really getting it back to the basics and just doing the things that honestly sound like good marketing, good decisions for the business. So let's get into it with Mason Cosby.
I learned about account-based marketing because I worked in a B2B company that was vertical specific in the fintech space. And I was talking with an agency and they're like, you should probably just run an ABM program. I was like, what's that? And they're like, well, you go after specific named accounts that are your best fit potential customers. And I was like, what would anybody else be doing? Like, that makes the most sense. Because if you serve a specific audience, just name the accounts, like name the companies you want to work for. And I built my career first in sales. So that was like all I thought through. It's like I had my list of prioritized accounts. I had 300 that I was responsible for. So everything I did was just to go after these accounts. So again, when I transitioned into marketing, I was like, well, duh. And then as I've learned more, so again, this was my first marketing job where I kind of fell into ABM. I was like, oh, there's like a lot of other things that a lot of other people do. So like my mindset and my framing for everything in marketing has always been through the lens of I've only worked in really niche companies where I thought ABM was the best thing. And then I inevitably worked in companies that weren't as niche, at which point I was like, oh, there's lots of people we should go after. But at the end of the day, there's only specific companies that are the most profitable for us. So we should probably just go after those and like focus on the companies that are the most, profit for the organization, that pay on time, that like are actually enjoy working with us. Crazy idea. We should enjoy working with the companies that we work with, and that actually see significant value and a high ROI. And really, I know that we technically could work with tons and tons and tons of companies, but maybe if we focused, we could get greater results for fewer companies, but then also maybe like charge. So like the more you dig into ABM and you really think about it, it is a holistic, it's a go-to-market program that is like fundamentally who are the best customers that we should work with, and then how do we solve that across every part of the organization so we all know exactly who we're trying to serve. So that's how I got started. And then specifically the framing of Scrappy, I worked at an agency and I ran the marketing of the agency, which is a side note. If you ever have the opportunity as a marketer to do that, it is by far my most favorite job that I ever had. Because my job was to marketing to marketers. So essentially I just got to like learn new stuff. And then I hosted a webinar every month where I taught people what I learned. And then I said, by the way, if you want help doing this stuff, we do it. You can buy from us. Like that was it. So it was awesome.
Right.
But I was given the task, build an ABM program, but you have nothing but HubSpot and like a data enrichment platform. I was like, okay. So I built the first iteration of a Scrappy ABM program there and realized, oh, this is a massive problem because ABM is largely associated with massive tech stacks that are super expensive. My favorite story is a CMO and CMO Coffee Talk walked through their ABM tech stack. And it was $910,000 a year as like just their ABM program tech stack. That is absolutely absurd. Nearly $1 billion for a tech stack? No, thank you. So this is a huge problem because people think that that's how they have to build ABM, when in reality, it's just going back to that fundamental challenge, which is who are our best fit potential customers that are highest profit? None of that has to do with technology. All of that has just to do with the strategy. So that's why we're here. Because again, ABM is largely associated with super expensive tech stacks and feels largely out of reach for a lot of people. But when done well, it is the most effective growth strategy that generates the highest profit and the best customers because it's designed to do that. So that's why we're here. That's what we're doing.
Sweet. And keeping it simple. I love it. It's interesting that you bring up the cross the customer journey piece, right? Is that so many go-to-market motions get themselves into trouble when they start trying to speak to everybody, acquiring people who aren't that best fit customer, and you inevitably feel it down the line, right? You end up with all sorts of marketing and sales alignment problems. You end up with sales and success alignment problems. You end up with churn and not the net revenue retention numbers that you want at the end of the day. So I guess if it is that simple, that if this is purely just talking about the best customers, the most profitable customers, and how do we go acquire just those, are there companies that should not be doing this? Like at what point is ABM a thing that you should reach for? At what point is it a thing that you should, maybe for later, not for us? What's the
Yeah.
sort of parameters on that?
Yeah, so the criteria around ABM is first a B2B company. So like if you're B2C or D2C, like this doesn't work because ABM stands for account-based marketing. So it's focused on a company, an account. So that's the first thing. Second thing is a dedicated sales team. This requires the involvement of a sales team in order to actually sell and get involved earlier in the overall go-to-market program than maybe a PLG motion, or I've even seen some B2B companies now coming out with more of an e-com type approach where like you don't have to talk to anybody, you can just buy it on your own, which is very interesting. I think it's a very cool idea, but that's not an ABM program, and that's fine. The next component would just be a clear market focus. So I referenced earlier, there's a lot of companies that could work with lots of companies, but like if you don't have a clear market focus where you're like, oh, clearly we serve this organization or these types of organizations super well, you really struggle. And often what I'm seeing works very well, and this is apparently a hot take, but like if you're a vertical SaaS company or a vertical specific company, you should only be doing ABM just outright, because there was a client that we worked with where their total addressable market was 500 accounts because they were a compliance software for the manufacturing and utility space that were government run utilities. 500 accounts total. We were talking through building an event strategy for them, and they're like, well, we could technically cold call everybody in 6 weeks. And I was like, I'm glad we're working on an ABM program because your TAM is so specific. Why would you run anything else? So that's another component to the criteria. It's a very clear market focus. I put an asterisk on this. Would be a minimum of a $50,000 average contract value, because by the nature that it's so focused and so specific and ideally so personalized, it is not a small investment. So you need an average contract value and a lifetime value that can support the actual investment from a time perspective. The asterisk that I put on that is if you are super vertical specific, so like that compliance software for the manufacturing utility space, again, it doesn't really matter what their average contract value is because their TAM is so small, they should only be running that. And the last piece to this is ideally some form of a significant expansion motion. I think something that's not talked about often enough is the opportunity around account-based customer marketing. My good friend Leslie Barrett wrote a book. She gave me 10 pages in that book. It's like a 140-page book, and she was gracious enough to give me 10 to talk through how to do it in a Scrappy method. But if you think about your customer base, it's just a target account list of your actual customers. So like if you think about best fit potential customers, you know who those are? Your actual current customers. Hopefully you have the best data on them. So an opportunity to focus around retention and expansion of your current customer base is one of the best use cases for ABM that is often never utilized in some organizations. So that would be the criteria. B2B, sales team, clear product market fit around a specific vertical, average contract value of at least 50K with that appropriate asterisk, and then an opportunity to inevitably expand your customer base.
All right. So if you're not going to go spend obscene amounts of money on your tech stack to roll this out, you already have HubSpot, you're using it for marketing and sales, presumably we just talked about the need for a sales team. Where do you start? Like there's nothing, and this goes for a lot of things in HubSpot, right? Like there is nothing that is labeled run an ABM program here in HubSpot.
Yeah.
What's the sort of, like, to get tactical, and maybe there's a step before this which is not tool specific because of the ABM is not a tool specific thing, but like where do you start when it goes to, okay, we fit those criteria, we want to roll this out, where's the sort of jumping off point?
Yeah, great question. And speaking on HubSpot, they even just kind of started to hide their target account list builder. So I'm very curious to see what HubSpot does in the next couple of weeks and months, because now if you try to go find it, like it used to just be in the tabs under companies, you could just click target accounts, and like that's not there anymore. You have to like go dig for it, which is really frustrating at times. But, you know, the first step is to designate your accounts in HubSpot in some way. Now, again, they do have the native target account dashboard where you can just designate that an account is a target account, and that's just a yes or no. The main reason this is step one is by designating your target accounts in HubSpot, it then becomes exponentially easier to build active lists that are around the filtering criteria of target account. So that would be step one. Obviously, in order to do that, you've got to have a clear ICP, a clear focus, a variety of other elements to actually identify those accounts. But assuming you already have all of that in place, designate your target accounts in HubSpot. Again, you can do that natively. The other thing that you can do if you want to get a little bit more fancy with it, or build out custom properties that then allow you to have more specific filtering criteria. We're not going to get super into that for the purposes of this podcast because that's very case by case specific. But depending on how you build out your program, it may make more sense to build a custom property so you have more flexibility. The example here would be better tiering. There is very poor account tiering capabilities natively within HubSpot. Because again, it's a target account is yes or target account is no. It's not like this is a tier A, a tier B, or tier C. So it would be a use case for tiering out and creating custom properties for your target account list.
Okay, so as you mentioned, there is a ton of work that is going to need to happen, hopefully has already happened, whatever motion you have from a go-to-market perspective in terms of identifying who those accounts or what those accounts should be. You have them designated in HubSpot, which allows you to do all sorts of interesting things when it comes to using those specific accounts in the other tools that you have access to inside of HubSpot. What does it actually look like to go, run plays, run a motion that gets us booked meetings, revenue, customers from those target accounts?
Yeah, so we think first through a framework. So we've got a framework on our side that is our 4D framework. So first would be data, next would be distribution, next is destination, and lastly is direction. So when I recommend tiering out your accounts and actually designating them as target accounts, that's a key component to data. So under the data bucket, we have targets and we have triggers. So again, by identifying your target accounts in HubSpot, you have your clear targets. What you don't yet have through just the targeting criteria is the trigger. So why are we reaching out? Because what often happens in ABM, which is another misconception, is awesome, I'll go build my target account list and then I'll just run them through an outbound sequence because that's what I'm supposed to do. And because they're a right fit customer, that I said that they were a right fit customer, and they may not know that they're a right fit customer, but I do, they should book a call with me. Which, when I say it like that, is obviously absurd. Of course not. But that's not what we do in practice often. We just outbound sequence them. So we want to then marry this target account list with some reason to reach out, reason to re-engage. So a couple of different viable triggers, as a variety of examples, would be like first-party website engagement. So you can also install a tool called like RB2B, or you can install Warmly, or you can install Factor.ai that all de-anonymize your website traffic. And those are starting for free as a side note. So you don't have to go buy a new tool, but you can, my recommendation would be RB2B because of the Slack integration. You can then, again, outbound sequence those people or involve them in some kind of another program. But those are data. So again, you have who we're going after and why are we reaching out. And then the other thing that is not a tool specific, but is incredibly important, would then be how do we message these people appropriately? Again, giving a quick example, often we'll just go pull a list that's an ICP fit list within HubSpot of like our specific criteria. And we don't factor in why we're reaching out. We're just like, these are right fit accounts. Well, some of these accounts have never scheduled a call with us. Some of them may have scheduled a call with us. Some of them may be closed lost opportunities. Some of them may have been former customers. So they all have different experiences with us, but we all message them the same because they fit this criteria and they're not currently an active in pipeline opportunity or a customer, which is not the best way to go about it. So when you marry who we're going after with why we're reaching out, you then have different messaging that matches that account in their journey towards becoming your customer. So again, clearly, if someone's never booked a call with you, you should message them differently than somebody that's already gone through a sales cycle and has a closed lost opportunity. And you should also message those very differently from past customers that have worked with you that know why they left you and need to overcome a past objection on why they've already disengaged from you previously. All of those are different messages. So again, that's the first piece. That is all before we get into the tactics around distribution and destination.
Okay, so you mentioned one sort of big gotcha there, right? Like, do not send the same message to everybody on your target account list. Are there other things that are, a little gray that folks might argue should be a different way than you would recommend when it comes to running a program? Is there anything that you would do, that you are doing differently because you were taking a Scrappy approach that would change as you start spending more money on your tech stack? Or is it, no, actually, like, this is just a first principles approach, and whatever tech you have, this is the right approach?
I mean, people are going to disagree with me in general because, admittedly, I have a perspective that works for us and for many others, but I can guarantee that somebody has built some kind of a trigger-based program that didn't work for them, and as a result, they don't think it works. That's fine. The thing is, from my perspective, it's really hard to disagree with. We should think about who we're reaching out to and why we're reaching out. Like, that's essentially what this is. Who are our targets? What is our trigger that indicates we should reach out? And then based on those two things, what do we say to them? That is all I'm communicating. So again, if you disagree with that, that's okay. You're probably just not going to have successful programs because you're not being intentional with your outreach, which is fine. That's on you. The only other thing that may be slightly controversial is specifically as you get started in the build process. This may be, again, slightly controversial. I focus more on triggers than targets because the trigger is actually what starts the program from an operations perspective. So our primary goal is to find good triggers because inevitably you can do different promotional programming higher up in their buyer's journey or account progression model to drive them into specific triggers. So like prime example, website re-engagement is a great playbook in general, but if you don't have a ton of ICP fit traffic at this moment, you may have fewer targets than other triggers, but this trigger is a foundational trigger that helps you with tracking and re-engagement to anything. So it may be great to start there because it's a good foundational program because your website is a central hub through which somebody actually converts. So if you can understand who's hitting your website, even if there's not a lot there right now, that will be beneficial for an extended period of time.
Okay, so there is some level of hierarchy to the sequencing of triggers if you are rolling them out one by one or, not everything on day one.
Yes. I only recommend that you build out one program at a time. I know that some people, as we've even had conversations with people working with us, are like, we love these programs. Can we build all 6 at the same time? I'm like, technically, yes. But if we divide our focus, it will just take longer to get even the first one out. So I recommend doing one at a time because they stack. So prime example, a website re-engagement program is a great place to start for most people, or a closed loss program is a great place to start for a lot of people because you have great data there and you have a clear reason to re-engage because it's time bound based on a closed loss reason. Those two are great. Some people disagree with that, but that's fine because I like closed loss as a good starting point because that runs as a quarterly program. So as you then fill up your pipeline and then inevitably have more deals that close out that are not one opportunities, you can still re-engage them. And that's just a foundational program that continues to run in perpetuity. So that may be where some of the controversy comes in around like where to start. Because most people in ABM say start with the right fit accounts, but I don't think that's wise because I want to start with the highest propensity to buy. And generally speaking, those are people that already know that I exist. So starting at lower funnel triggers is going to have more momentum earlier.
Okay, so before we get into the rest of the Ds, how frequently are you revisiting each step in this process? Is this a sort of continuous learning model? Are you trying to build a closed loop around this? We mentioned starting with the highest intent, closest to revenue triggers. Are you continuing to reevaluate those as do you find, let's say, some closed loss reasons don't work as well as other closed loss reasons? Eliminate those from a program. Is that a sort of integral part of the system?
Yeah, so generally speaking, when you go to launch the program, if it's going to break operationally, it will break in the first week because that's where most things break from an ops perspective. The ongoing optimization is around the content and the messaging because the message may need to change over time based on how the market changes or how the audience changes. Like I keep referencing this for staffing firms and recruiting firms. But if you look at, for example, the FTC's ruling that non-compete agreements are no longer in play 2 months ago, that was major news. Today, it's now slated to take effect as of September 4th, but it's technically caught up in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court still has to make a ruling on whether or not a government entity like the FTC can make this kind of a regulatory change without congressional approval. But if this goes through, for staffing and recruiting firms, there was no intent, there was no anything. This is just a massive way that the game for recruiting and staffing is now changed. So as a result of this major change, probably some of the messaging needs to change. Because you can now have the opportunity to go after a larger pool of people because you're no longer concerned around, well, this person that we would want to go after or help move to a new job can't because of a non-compete agreement. So we need to update our messaging to now reflect that any job is now fair game because non-competes are no longer in effect unless you're a policy-making executive that made more than $150,000 in the past year. That's the only exclusion. So that's really nuanced and really detailed for a very specific subset of people. But from a program perspective, if the trigger was they wanted to work with us previously and they didn't, the process and the operations don't change. It's the message that we then send to the audiences.
Let's move on to the next step. So we have our, have our list, we have our triggers, we have our targets. The operational piece is stood up sort of at this point from a program perspective. What goes into that operational setup on day one versus things that you're sort of adding later down the line?
Yeah, this sounds really complex, but like in practice, it's a couple of workflows and some automated list segmentation. Like that's what this is. Because you've just identified on the front end around the data sets, these are our different filtering criteria. And as a result of accounts having, it could literally be contact properties or account or company properties or even deal properties in your HubSpot CRM. Based on these properties changing and becoming this new status, that should kick into a workflow. And then out of that workflow, it then gets into distribution. So that might be that they get added to a specific list. And that list then is the list that's an active list that runs our ad programming. It could be that list. What I really love about HubSpot for account-based marketing is that so much of your tactics from a distribution perspective can be list-based. Like you can build list-based chat flows. You can build list-based pop-ups. You can build list-based emails, list-based outbound sequences. Like everything in HubSpot can be list-based. So if you have great triggers and great targets that are based on the data that is housed within your HubSpot portal, your workflows from a trigger perspective can just add people to specific lists. And those lists then are active and are then what change across the rest of your HubSpot portal from a distribution perspective. So again, once you've operationalized the data, it's then just distribution. So what are the channels and tactics we're going to use to get in front of this audience? And like the simple answer is, where do they live? Like, is it social? Is it an ad program that's going to get in search or ad programming and social? And again, HubSpot can do Meta and LinkedIn through the ad platform. And fun fact, and maybe this is out of date. If it's not, everybody should check this out. You can do list-based advertising through the Google Ad Network if you have a lifetime spend with Google Ads of 50,000 through the HubSpot ad extension. So if you've spent 50 grand, you can actually upload a contact list, and you just have to have 1,000 that are matched contacts. So 1,000 is still a lot for an ABM program. But if you think about it, that's 100 accounts, and you're going after 10 people at every account. So like you can still run a one-to-many program without an ABM platform through the Google Search Network. Super helpful. So all of that's just distribution, and it's largely going to be based on the list that you then create through your data-driven workflows.
All right. I love how you do make it sound a lot simpler than buying, millions and millions of dollars worth of software here.
Yes. You're telling me, man. It's ridiculous.
Are there distribution channels or the distribution tactics that you particularly like, that you prioritize, that you sort of go to, that everybody should run, or is it going to be different for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's entirely dependent on where your audience lives. So like I can tell you, go run an outbound sequence in LinkedIn, but like if you are going after an audience that is not active on LinkedIn, that's not a super useful channel for you. For me, it's great. Most of my audience is on LinkedIn, but like for you, that may not be. So again, it comes down to where does your audience live? That said, most people have an email address, which is why the go-to is generally email, but it's also in a very crowded space. I think another thing that's like super underrated right now that we're seeing a pretty significant resurgence on would be cold calling. Now, I want to be clear, people have a love-hate relationship with this, but I actually have a meeting on my calendar for like next week because somebody cold called me and was like, hey, we want to do a partnership opportunity. I'm like, great. I actually, like, and it aligned because they'd actually done really great research on me to see that I want to work with different tech partners to create enablement documentation, but I'm still going to be tech agnostic. So like, it can work if it's personalized and specific. Now, if you're just calling down a list and you're like, hi, you have a pulse, could we, have a conversation? That's not going to work, but that never worked. So again, it's just dependent on where your audience functionally lives. If you do this through an outbound sequence, which you can automate the starting through HubSpot, I would either do this as super segmented lists that are automated or hand-picked lists that are manual. So ideally, there's some level of personalized touch, but that's a lot of what this is. It's just identifying where does our audience functionally live so that they'll actually functionally engage with these different distribution channels.
So once we have distribution, we've made contact with our target accounts. What's the sort of final piece in the puzzle? I'm assuming it's not make contact, automatic, meetings booked, revenue.
So we think a lot about going back to who is it and why are we reaching out? Ideally, when you look at that, there is something that you're trying to help them understand. So if you think through every program that you run with the primary objective being, what is the next thing they need to understand that helps them take the next step towards becoming our customer? I just lovingly refer to this as next step content. So what is it? For me, often for someone to come and buy from us, they need to understand our 4D framework. So I spend a lot of time publicly talking about the 4D framework. But if somebody then hits our website and is looking at our website, I know there's an exponentially high likelihood they know our 4D framework. At which point, I then need to get them into a variety of specific playbooks so they can wrap their head around how the framework works. And then if they come back again and they hit the schedule a call page but they don't book a call, I know they need to understand if this actually works in practice. So then I'm now sending them case studies and success stories that illustrate the success of the programs. So again, most top of funnel for me is admittedly this right here. It's just helping people understand. And again, I'm not going to reach out to you if you hit our website and say like, great, thanks for hitting the website. I'm just going to connect with you on LinkedIn and hopefully you start to see some of my content. Or maybe you go check out my podcast because we got like 80 episodes that talk about this a lot. But if you listen to a bunch of podcast episodes and you come back to the website and you hit the schedule a call page and you don't book a call, of course I'm going to reach out. Because at that point, I know that you're actively engaged and you just need to understand not the theory, because you got the theory. Now the question is functionally, what does a partnership with Scrappy ABM look like? So again, it's all just next step content. Where are they today? What do they need to understand next to actually move forward with us? And that's probably not a booked meeting, except for a very small subset of these accounts. It's likely just product pages, success stories, thought leadership, and I mean actual genuine thought leadership that helps shift somebody's perspective. My favorite post on LinkedIn this week was a meme that was like when executives realized that thought leadership requires both thought and leadership. And it's like, you can't just have a thought leadership strategy without thinking. And I hate to put it that bluntly, but so many people just post crap. They're like, it's our thought leadership. It's just not. Like, it's not leading in any thoughts. So ideally, that's what you're building towards, is how do you help shape somebody's perspective? Once they're bought in on the perspective, then they're going to start to try to figure out how to build it, often on their own. Like, they don't want to buy something. They just want to figure it out for themselves. So how do you help them start to figure it out? Some of them may actually get it, which is awesome. Most of them will not have the time to do it because they already have full-time day jobs. So they're going to figure out what does it look like to work with you, at which point you can then tell them, help them understand, and then they'll enter into a buying conversation with you.
All right. So that all sounds awesome. And of course, if you've done the work at the top, you know that everybody who you're engaging with, who is engaging with you, meets whatever filtered criteria you met. What do you look at from a measurement perspective? Like, how do you know that all these steps that we've just gone through, the 4D framework, how do you know that it's working? How do you know what's not working, what to focus on and look at?
Great question. So the 4D framework is just kind of the starting point. So again, I think a lot of people could get a lot of momentum built towards just a closed loss program, a customer win-back program, a customer referral program, like those kinds of programs. And in those contexts, those are like very immediate conversion-based programs. So the question is, in a closed loss program, I went out to them, said, hey, we should have another conversation. Did they book a meeting or not? That's your measure of success. Customer win-back program, it's the exact same. Referral program, did we get referrals? Website re-engagement, did they come back to the website and explore the page that we sent them to? So whatever is the destination is then the measure of success. Did they actually go and engage with said thing? Now, what we haven't talked through, which is kind of what I would refer to as step 2, which is where you actually transition this into a true ABM program, is you marry the activation play concept with an account progression model, where then you clearly define what is awareness. Like, how do we determine that an account knows that we exist? What is initial engagement? What is meaningful engagement? What is a marketing qualified account? What is re-engagement? What is a sales qualified account? And what is an opportunity? And then when you define those things, the direction, which is how you track success, aligns with the definition that you made of your account progression model. And that's how you then create a closed loop program. So it's a whole other thing. It's probably a whole other podcast episode in and of itself. But essentially, the purpose of every activation play is to identify who we're going after and why are we reaching out. Once you've identified those two things, you should have clear next step content. So what are we trying to help them understand? And then you measure success by, did they actually engage with or do the intended action based on the destination? Distribution is just how you get it in front of them so that they actually may go to the destination. So that is how you measure success.
I love it. I'm going to ask you one final question here. Maybe the most fun one. Maybe the most controversial one. What is the thing that everybody thinks they are doing absolutely right that they are doing horribly wrong when it comes to ABM? Beyond the spending way too much money on a tech stack. Sorry,
I have so many thoughts. I think the number one thing is they just there's a couple of things. One, grasping at straws around definitions. I've got a couple of clients that have reframed it from ABM to ABX or ABE. And don't get me wrong, I understand. You want to not call it ABM so people don't think it's a marketing program. All these words are made up anyway. Don't get so stuck on the words that then you just, who cares if you even call it ABM? Just call it a revenue program. It doesn't matter what it's called. It's just are you doing the stuff? I had a client that was like, I don't know if we can work with you because we're running an ABX program. I'm like, what? Define ABX. What the heck does that mean? Because ABM has 1,000 different definitions too. So I just think people get so stuck on the terminology when none of this existed anyway and it's all made up. That's why people get really frustrated with me when I do a webinar with them, because the first thing I do in every webinar is I define what ABM means for the purpose of that conversation. Well, I think people know in this audience what this means. I'm like, they have their own understanding and they're coming in and they might be the same, but it's probably not. And I want to make sure we get on the same page. So that's the first thing. It's just who cares what it's called? Define it for your organization and don't even call it ABM. It doesn't matter. It just genuinely does not matter. So that's the first thing. Second thing, they just get analysis paralysis on the targets. We had a client that was in pipeline for 9 months. And again, we're a 1-year-old organization. So that's a long time for us. And they just kept coming back and saying well, what if we went after this audience? Or what if we went after this audience? Or what if we went after this vertical? And I was like, a part of our program will help you identify the audience you should go after. If you would just sign the agreement, we can help you. They're like, well, no, we want to make sure we've got a right target. I was like, okay. So we ended up spending 9 months just hanging out. And I ended up just kind of letting it go, if I'm being honest, and stopped following up. But they still haven't launched the program. We're reconnecting next week to talk through targets. That's insane. So don't get the analysis paralysis. That's why I really like starting with triggers first, because it gets movement. You start doing something that generates some kind of results that helps you then further get buy-in. So that's really it. Obviously don't invest in massive tech stack where you've validated a model, because that's a waste of money and time. Don't get so caught up on the terminology. And it's actually probably better you don't call it ABM, because if you call it something that's unique to your organization, people can't Google what that means and then come up with their own definitions. You control the narrative and the definition from the very beginning. And then lastly, just start with good triggers. If people hit your website and the right fit, I don't care if they're on the target account list or not that you've clearly defined. Reach out to them, get them into a meeting, help them understand the next step. It doesn't matter if they're on the target account list or not. The goal is to get movement, not perfection.
I love it. I love how so much of this conversation was about doing the basics.
Yeah.
Starting with the things that actually move the needle, rather than worrying about the program and all the shiny things that you could do and can follow to make your ABM program look great and complex and magical.
That's actually the final point. Just start with the fundamentals. It's not that complicated. Just start somewhere, and you'll find out all your problems, and you can fix your problems once you've actually started doing something.
Thanks so much for joining us. I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Mason. If you're interested in seeing more playbooks like this one and more ways that you can solve go-to-market problems specifically in the context of what you're doing in your HubSpot account, definitely head over to connectedgtm.com. There's playbooks each week for everything from marketing attribution, account-based marketing like this one, health scoring, how to build renewal pipelines, all sorts of different playbooks to help you solve go-to-market problems in your account, and we lay them all out step by step. See you next time.